What do I do if a family member is keeping my loved one addicted? Welcome to Off the Beaten Couch. I'm Bonnie Adams, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in treating families recovering from addiction. Today we're going to be tackling a very thorny issue that many families face. What do I do if a family member is keeping my loved one addicted? This is one of those topics that hits hard because it's not just about the addiction, it's about the entire dynamics of the family connection, and the role that we play in each other's lives. And the person enabling your loved one is someone close. Like family, it adds an entire new layer of complexity. Today we're going to unpack this through the lens of attachment, addiction dynamics, and family systems. We'll also talk about what you can do to navigate this very difficult situation. Family dynamics is a tangled web, and addiction isn't just an individual struggle, it impacts the entire family. It weaves its tendrils through every relationship. And imagine a spider's web, where tugging on one strand sends vibrations through the entire web. And that's how addiction operates within the family system. Before we can intervene, we have to understand the dynamics within these relationships. Co-addiction creates emotional turmoil and confusion in families. On one hand, there's the desire to help your addicted loved one, and on the other hand, there's the frustration of dealing with another family member who seems to be making things worse. This duality can create feelings of anger and resentment and helplessness. So let me tell you a story about addiction, enabling, and family roles. Let's talk about Rachel. Rachel has a brother named Jake, and Jake has been in and out of treatment centers for years, and almost immediately after he comes home, he relapses. The reason? Mom. Now, let me be clear, Mom is not a bad person. Mom loves Jake and Rachel very, very much, but Mom struggles with her own substance use issues, namely alcohol. Instead of encouraging Jake to stay clean after he left treatment, she'd use with him. She'd say things like, at least we're using together and I know he's safe, I can keep him here. And if this sounds familiar, for Rachel, this was devastating. It was absolutely a losing battle. She'd get into arguments with her mom. She'd get into arguments with Jake, and she'd cut them off for brief periods of time. And Jake would be right back into treatment, come out, and start using with Mom again. So when other families are using alongside another family member, your addicted loved one, who maybe doesn't want help, it can be particularly difficult and heartbreaking. Reality is, even when someone is not actively seeking treatment, the rest of the family still plays an essential role in disrupting the cycle of addiction, enabling behavior, and dysfunction. It's important to remember that these family members aren't helpless, even though the addicted loved one may be resistant to change. The scenario of a family member using with your addicted loved one creates kind of a toxic cycle that reinforces the addiction in both parties. How and why does this dynamic occur? Well, using together normalizes the addictive behavior, and the family member may think that they're monitoring or limiting the intake, but in reality, they're just validating and perpetuating the cycle. And this dynamic can also lead to co-addiction, where both individuals become dependent on each other as well as the substance. It creates a false sense of connection and shared experience. And if you are fighting both of them on their connection and shared experience, they're going to have a common enemy, which is you. And this is going to solidify their connection even more. So learning how to focus on your relationship with your addicted loved one rather than their relationship with your addicted loved one can take you out of this role. The enabling family member's judgment is also impaired, and it makes it impossible for them to provide genuine support or encourage recovery. This situation can also stem from deeply rooted codependency issues where the enabler's self-worth is tied to the addict's needs. Both individuals may use substances to avoid addressing underlying emotional issues or family conflicts, or even a disconnect that's occurred between them and their relationship. So let's go back to Rachel's family and look at addiction and attachment and identifying this false sense of connection. So here's what was happening in Rachel's family, and maybe it's happening in yours too. Addiction creates this false sense of connection, and it tricks people into thinking that they're bonding over something meaningful, when really they're just feeding the addiction together. For Jake and his mom, drinking together became a way for them to stay close. And it wasn't about love or trust, it was about survival. And for Rachel, she felt completely shut out of that bond. And this is where attachment theory comes in. As humans, we're wired for connection, and it's literally built into our DNA. We seek out relationships that make us feel safe and seen, but when addiction enters the picture, those connections get distorted. And instead of finding safety in healthy relationships, people start finding it in substances, and sometimes in the people that enable their use. From the attachment theory perspective, addiction often becomes a means of emotional regulation. Both the addicted person and the family member who is using with them or enabling them may have developed unhealthy attachment patterns, and they may feel a sense of closeness through their shared use, but this connection is not genuine or sustainable. It's based on mutual dependency, avoidance of difficult emotions, and a shared inability to deal with the real issues in the relationship. In the scenario of Rachel, Jake, and their mom, addiction formed a false bond where the substance or behavior became the primary way that the family members interacted. Even though Rachel wasn't using, she communicated to her family members, to Jake and her mom, through the lens of addiction. Addiction became her focus on how she communicated to them and how she connected with them. The use between family members creates a temporary illusion of intimacy, as the family members kind of feel like they're in it together with their loved one. But it prevents both people, even family members who aren't using, from forming a healthier, more authentic emotional connection. Now let's jump on over to family systems theory. In family systems theory, addiction is viewed as a relational problem, not just an individual problem. When a family member is using alongside their addicted loved one, they're perpetuating a dysfunctional cycle within the family system. Both individuals are contributing to the system's maintenance, whether consciously or unconsciously, and the system has become enmeshed in unhealthy behaviors and coping mechanisms, creating the environment where addiction thrives. Now, even though there is dysfunction for this family system, it is how they function. It creates a sense of homeostasis or balance within the system. And the family system is trying to maintain the balance, even if that balance is built on unhealthy foundations. Both the addicted loved one and the family member using together may be stuck in a feedback loop, where their mutual addiction creates temporary relief from emotional pain, but ultimately deepens the problem. In these situations, family members or loved ones may feel stuck between two powerful forces: their love and desire to support their loved one, and the knowledge that their behavior is contributing to the addiction's continuation. It can be incredibly difficult to see this dynamic clearly, especially when you're caught up right in the middle of it. It's easy to feel trapped, particularly if there are feelings of guilt, which we feel, shame, or fear about disrupting the bond. If I say something, they're going to get upset with me, they're not going to talk to me anymore, they're going to go about their own way, I'm going to do something wrong. And so it kind of stops us from moving into that space of confronting the issue, or even just being with our loved one outside of the addiction. Now, the attachment theory lens helps us understand that addiction often emerges from deep-seated emotional wounds, such as childhood neglect, abandonment, or trauma. When a family member is using with the addicted loved one, it may be because they're seeking emotional closeness or relief from their own unresolved emotional pain. In some cases, both people may have developed insecure or disorganized attachment styles where they struggle to maintain healthy emotional connections and instead rely on substances as a means of coping. For the family member using with the addicted loved one, there may be a desire to feel connected, needed, or loved. The shared substance use becomes a way to bond, even if the bond is based on unhealthy patterns. This can create what we refer to in the treatment world as codependency, where both parties enable each other's addiction and their emotional needs are constantly met through the shared substance use or through the enabling behavior. Neither person is able to break free from this cycle, as each may feel like their emotional needs are being met in the context of the addiction, even though those needs are never truly fulfilled. In these situations, the relationship between the addicted loved one and the family member is fraught with contradictions. On one hand, there's the sense of closeness and togetherness as they are engaging in the addiction together. On the other hand, this closeness is based on destructive patterns that prevent either individual from growing emotionally or experiencing a healthy connection. The family member using alongside the addicted loved one or enabling the addicted loved one may feel like they're bonding or helping or even keeping their loved one from spiraling deeper into their addiction, but in reality, they're only reinforcing the unhealthy system that keeps both stuck in this cycle. So if your loved one has a family member who is enabling them or even using alongside them, it can create this toxic bond that feels unbreakable. But here's what I want you to hear. This bond isn't love. It's addiction playing dress up as connection. So let's look at the systemic impact when family dynamics keep addiction alive. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture, the family system as a whole. Addiction doesn't just happen to the individuals, it happens within the families, and families are complicated. We all have roles that we play in families, whether we realize it or not, kind of try them on when we're little and then develop them and perfect them as we move forward in our families of origin, and even take that or try to take that role into the new family that we create later on in life. So looking back at Rachel and her family, her mom had taken on the role of enabler, trying to keep Jake close by using with him. And then Rachel had become the fixer, trying desperately to hold everything together while feeling increasingly isolated. And Jake, he's kind of stuck in the middle. He's caught between his addiction and his family dynamics. He wants to be clean. He's gone to treatment multiple times, but he also wants to feel close to his mom and may not have learned any other ways to be able to feel close to his mom. So here's what I want you to know. These roles aren't set in stone. They're patterns that have developed over time, and patterns can change. So what can you do when you feel like a family member is keeping your loved one addicted? There are actionable steps that you can take. One of them is focus on your relationship with your addicted loved one. You can't control what anyone else does, not your addicted loved one and not the family member enabling them. You can focus on building a stronger bond with your addicted loved one outside of the addiction. So if your addicted loved one loves art, or they love going on hikes, or if they enjoy going to movies, or if they enjoy getting ice cream, then do something with them in that environment that's outside of the addiction. And so not doing this as a way to conduct an intervention with your loved one, because the conversation doesn't always need to be around addiction. Let's focus on the behavior rather than the addiction, and building a strong, healthy bond outside of the addiction. Set boundaries without ultimatums. So boundaries are about practicing your own well-being, not punishing your loved one. Remember that boundaries are about what you will do, not about trying to control somebody else. So you can say to your loved one, I love you, and I want to support your recovery, but I can't support behaviors that keep you stuck. Address enabling behavior compassionately. If it feels safe to do so, have an honest conversation with the family member you believe is enabling your loved one. Try something like, I know you love Jake as much as I do, but I'm worried that some of what we're doing might be keeping them stuck. Share resources if they're open to it, but remember that change has to come from them. If it's not safe to do so, continue to focus on your relationship with your addicted loved one, not their relationship with your addicted loved one. Take care of yourself. This isn't selfish. It's essential. Find support through therapy, through groups like Al-Anon or Nar-Anon or Smart Recovery. Find something, whether it's online or in person. Connect with friends and family that you can talk to about these things, or that you don't even have to talk to about these things. Find something that you can do as well outside of the addiction, and not building your life around the addiction and whatever havoc the addiction is creating. I know that's difficult. I know that's really, really difficult, but it's important to sometimes even compartmentalize the addiction a little bit so it doesn't continue to take over your life, because it does. Practice self-care in whatever way feels meaningful to you, whether it's journaling, exercising, or simply taking time to breathe. Now, this last part, which is totally something a therapist would say, and I get it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Accept what you can't control. This is the hardest part, but also the most freeing. You can't control your loved one's choices or anyone else's. What you can control is how you show up with love, compassion, and healthy boundaries. Sometimes our addicted loved ones choose not to get help. Sometimes they do choose to get help, and they go through treatment multiple times. And sometimes they recover on their own, or sometimes they don't recover at all. And it's devastating. The impact of addiction on families is absolutely devastating. And I hear you and I see you. But understand that these things aren't things that you can control. What you can control is how you show up for yourself and for the other people in your life that are addicted or affected by your loved one's addiction. Before we wrap it up today, I want to tell you about how things turned out for Rachel's family. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but change did come. Rachel started going to therapy for herself and learned how to set boundaries, and learn how to set boundaries without guilt. Over time, Jake entered treatment again, and this time he stayed clean long enough for real healing to begin. And as for their mom, she eventually sought help for her own substance use issues as well. But not because anyone forced her to. She did it because Rachel modeled what healthy boundaries look like. And because Jake finally started choosing recovery over addiction. Now, let me be clear, not every story ends like this, but every story has hope. Remember this, addiction thrives on disconnection, but recovery begins with connection. By focusing on building healthier relationships, both with your loved ones and with yourself, you can start to shift these dynamics. You're not powerless in this process, and you're not alone on this journey. Thank you for joining me today on Off the Beaten Couch. If today's episode resonated with you or gave you even a glimmer of hope, please share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, keep showing up for yourself and those you love, even when it feels hard, because recovery starts right here.